Welcome to the CAPB Podcast. I am delighted to welcome Shelley Bradley-Scholey of Fortitude Psychological Therapy. Welcome to the podcast, Shelley. You are our first Royal Navy veteran on the pod. Go the senior service. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We are really looking forward to your story. The CAPB Podcast is about business. It's about veterans who go into business and their amazing stories. So first of all, Shelley, tell us about your military service.
So I joined the military as a pre-trained nurse. So I was already a mental health nurse working in the NHS when I joined. So I joined around about 2008, sort of the back end of Optelic, kind of Herrick was happening. And that was really the reason that I joined. Like, I wanted to do something that was different. I wanted to go and support people who'd been exposed to traumatic stuff, and it was all going on at the time. So off I trotted to the careers office and was like, "Oh, I've heard you have mental health nurses in the military." And they were like, "Nah, no, we don't." I was like, "No, you definitely do. I've seen it in like this magazine." And they were like, "No, I don't. Maybe the Navy do." This was the Army office. "Maybe the Navy do. They're downstairs." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So off I went downstairs, and the Navy were like, "Oh, yeah, we do." And that was it. I mean, obviously, as you well know, the Army does have mental health nurses too, but the guys in the careers office obviously hadn't got the memo. They're lost.
Absolutely. We could have had, you could have been in the Army. That'd have been amazing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have lasted as long as I did though. So yeah, that was that really. And then obviously I did my basic training, which was a bit of a shock to the system, if I'm honest. I understood what I was signing up for in terms of the professional role. I don't think I really fully understood what I was signing up for in terms of the military role. So it was a very steep learning curve.
When I joined when I was 16, and it was the same thing. It was like, yeah, this is going to be brilliant until it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Until it was like, what? You're telling me what time to go to bed? What? Or it was, yeah. And I remember my first day in basic training being 16 and 7 months. And the guy in the bed space next to me was 33, and he was like divorced, and he had 2 kids. And it was like, how can we be the same when this guy's like practically double my age?
Yeah, it is crazy, really. And I do recall. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I look back now, I think, what on earth? I recall sort of saying to my friends in, like, you know, this dormitory, like, "I'm not wearing them shoes. Like, they can't make me." And I'd walk and I'd refuse to march. I mean, honestly, they must have thought, "What on earth is this woman doing here?" But it's amazing how quickly I became, like, I adapted to my environment. I became pretty institutionalized quite quickly. And by the end of my training, I was like all over it, like the bossy class leader, you know, kind of. So it didn't take long to adapt. And then, yeah, so that was kind of the start of what became like a 14-year career in defence mental health services.
There's with like being a mental health nurse before with the NHS. It's got to be surely like polar opposites of the mental health scale, working with soldiers and airmen and, you know, people in the Navy, to working in Civvy Street. That must have been like a crazy shock.
Yeah, it was really different. And one of the things that struck me straight away was like how, like, people were really well engaged. Like, they always turn up to their appointments, they'd always turn up on time, they'd always do what we asked them to do. They'd be like really genuinely appreciative of your help, like, every time. And I'd come from services where that wasn't always the case. So I worked in like prisons and secure facilities where, you know, sometimes you'd get hit by a patient or a chair thrown at you or whatever. So that was
Yeah.
like a real stark difference. I think, you know, the military population as a whole, people would say are maybe trickier to engage in like psychologically based stuff and mental health stuff. Um, which I think, you know, actually once you got people in the door, that wasn't necessarily my experience of it.
I do want to ask a question around, because you joined in, like you said, right at the end of Telic, sort of in the midst of Herrick, you know, real sort of turbulent time for all three forces. And I got out in early 2013, having served 3 tours of Iraq and a tour of Afghan, and the services at that point, the services that you provide, almost felt like in infancy in comparison to what they are now. So from someone that was in that environment, did you feel that when you walked into that sort of door, it was like, oh shit, we've got a lot of work to do here? Or did you, I mean, I'm only from my personal point of view, it was like, well, there's help there, but you obviously also had, rightly or wrongly, the stigmatism of going for help because you're a roughy tufty soldier or a roughy tufty serviceman, and you don't need it. Just just get on with it, crack on. And a lot of people have done that. It would be good to see your insight, having worked into that environment at a really turbulent time in 2008 onwards. So
Yeah, I mean, it was a rough time. Like I recall being in basic training and I was a bit scared of something, and the instructor was like yelling at me, and they were like, "You need to get over that effing wall. Like you're going to be in a war zone before you know it. Out of everyone here, like get on with it." And like it kind of was right. Like the minute I went to my first unit, it was very apparent to me that the fallout of those ongoing conflicts was rife, you know. And I think the service that was offered when I joined was definitely different to that which was being offered when I left. It was different in terms of like the numbers of people we were seeing. There seemed to be less. We had actually more capacity and flexibility to get out to units and do like lots of informal work and kind of engagement work and working with the units we'd be deploying with to kind of, I suppose, like be a known face so that we weren't this kind of unknown entity. And like, I suppose credibility was quite important in terms of us being like a trusted person. So we definitely seemed to have more capacity, and we didn't really have big waiting lists, which is
no.
interesting. At the point I left, what we were offering in terms of therapies was more sophisticated, but with that came bigger waiting lists, more red tape, a real lack of capacity to go and do all these other things, which was a part of the job I loved. So it kind of felt like when I left, what I was seeing was much more similar to what we see in the NHS. But I'm not wholly convinced, actually, that that model is the best fit for that population. I think that kind of having flexibility, capacity, like low-level engagement works really well for the military.
So yeah, that kind of opens my eyes to that sort of environment. So thanks for that. Thanks for that bit of information. That was great. I want to move on to, okay, military career, you know, done and dusted, shall we say? And then you go, right, time. Now is the time to push the button. I want to go on a new adventure. Not only do you leave the military, but you go, which is, by the way, a very scary thought if all you know is military and you've never lived the civvy life, as it were. So you've pushed that button to go, right, I'm moving away from this life, because it is a life, it's not a job, and I'm going to start my own business. So you're already taking that massive leap back into general popular, shall we say, and you're going to start a business. So where did the idea come from for your business?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a massive leap, isn't it? Like, we were living in a military house actually when I left. My husband had been in the military too. He left a little bit before me. So we had that whole kind of find somewhere to live, find a job, pay the mortgage, all that was going on. And it was actually around COVID kind of time as well. So not only are we making that big decision, and also there's this like global pandemic going on.
You don't do things by halves then.
Yeah, I know. I do like to kind of go all in. So I created a bit of a safety net at first. Like, I found a job in the NHS and I found a job in a veteran service working with trauma. So I basically kind of moved into something that felt really safe. And I did that part-time alongside starting my business. Very quickly, I realised that for the same reasons I left the military, I didn't want to be in the NHS either. Like, I wanted to do things on my own terms. I wanted to offer something that I felt was really high quality, like really responsive and efficient. And I didn't feel I could do that in organisations anymore. So it was kind of a no-brainer that the best way to do that is to offer it in business. It was a tough decision insofar as, like, when you work in healthcare and public services, you kind of have like a value set, don't you, about being able to offer things to people that don't cost too much money. And that, I suppose that's part of the reason I sort of tried to make it work in the NHS, was because I really believed that I wanted to be able to offer high quality therapy and supervision to people that was free. But the nature of public services is that you can't always do that. You can't offer things in the way that you'd like to because of austerity and cost efficiency. So I thought, got it, I'm going to do it. So then I just went all in, which was like terrifying because I live on the south coast. It ain't cheap. We've moved out of this like really, cheap military house into this house that we're in now. I've got two small kids. One was like probably 18 months, 2 years old. The other was just starting school. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start this business. My husband was like, ah. But here we are. And it went okay. Yeah.
Did it, when you started the business, sorry Paul, when you started the business, was it like referrals? Were you like, right, I've got all these contacts from the NHS for my patients who I want to offer more for, I'll go referrals and go from there? Or did you think, I'm going to build a website, push social media, and your social media is on point, by the way, and go, I'm going to direct people and I'm going to provide a service with my calendar open and people can book slots? What was the model?
Yeah. So this is the part where I think people can get really tangled up in, and I got tangled up in it for a while, where there was certain systems I needed to have in place and certain like assurances, but I think you can end up trying to make all that stuff perfect before you do anything. So then you just procrastinate and do nothing, just faff around with this website for 6 months and that kind of thing. So I did have a website. I had like a directory listing, and I have a lot of professional contacts like in this industry. And I'd been approached with like little bits of freelance sort of work, like non-clinical work, teaching, supporting other companies. So I'd been approached with little bits, and I'd always had to say no because I didn't have the setup to be able to do it. But in the end, I thought, right, I need to like set myself a bit of a timeline here, like X amount of weeks to set up this website, a little checklist of the bare essentials, like, indemnity, insurance, like information governance protection. And then I'm just going to do it. Because I think you can get so caught up in things have got to be just right and then just never do anything, And once that ball started rolling, like, I'm so busy, like it's another level, and it's not even just therapy work. Actually, that's like a small portion of my work now. I get to do loads of other cool, exciting stuff that, 12 20 years ago me could have only dreamed of.
It's amazing. Your story is amazing, and as I say, I think to go from, as you say, that risk of leaving, and then the risk of going, I'm going to go into business, and then and I can really relate to I've got to get everything right. Paul and I have been talking about this podcast for nearly 3 years. And you're absolutely right. It was a conversation, just chats. Then we were like, there's real value in it. We've got loads of people who we know. And we did nothing about it. And I mean, nothing. We kept thinking, it needs to be perfect. We tried to do it once. Just me and Paul on the phone.
Car crash. But we
It
tried.
was, I'm not even joking. It kept cutting out. We sat in, like Paul was at his house, I was here. We must have been an hour trying to record a 5-minute thing that we could then use as an intro. And it just didn't go anywhere. And then we decided around, a number of sort of things happened, and it was like, if we don't do this and just, like you say, just ship it as it is, let's deliver a minimal viable product, let's do something and see if people want it. Let's see if people need it, and then we'll react to the feedback. And I think the fact that your business is now probably far different to what you thought it was going to be because you've reacted to feedback and change,
Yeah, and when people see you out there doing things, then opportunities are created. And I suppose for me, I had to just get out my own head. Like, I have quite a lot of, self-doubt, and I'm quite self-critical. And I had to just sort of start telling myself, like, this is going to work. This is going to be a success. Like, to a point where, like, I need to make this a success because I've got children to look after and a mortgage to pay. So I need to be like a success story with this. And once I kind of got out of my own head a little bit, I just started like taking action then. Because you don't achieve anything by just sitting around thinking of good ideas, do you? You've got to then do something with it.
Do you find that the skill sets that you've learned, not only, I would suppose, in the military, but obviously before the military, you were NHS, so that must have been quite a big shift. And I'm just wondering the key points that you've learned along the way up to pushing the button, hey, this is me, hey world, this is me, this is my business. Do you feel that the skill sets you've learned have helped you shape the way that your business is moving?
Yeah, I mean, like, I hate saying this because I feel like it's dead cringe, but like the military has kind of shaped me into the person that I am. And when I left, I was like, I'm not institutionalized. Like, I was 20 something when I joined, but yeah,
we won't say that.
I know, right? But I'm not. No, not me.
Were you doing that thing? Because you were Navy, were you doing that thing? What's it called at like 11 o'clock where you have to face the flag and that in the house? You're like, no, I'm not institutional. Oh, is that the?
Yeah. Every time you hear a whistle, you stop. Yeah. No, it was the point someone said to me in the NHS. They said to me, you really can't have your out of office on like that, Shelley. And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, it's dead blunt. It basically said something like, I'm out of office. If you need me, email me on this date when I'm back, or your emails are going to be deleted. And they were like, you can't do that. It needs to be much more compassionate. And I thought, yeah, they've got me. So, yeah, I think the military has shaped aspects of who I am, right? And I think it took me so far out my comfort zone. Like, I shot a rifle for the first time and cried. I got on a helicopter for the first time, literally didn't have a clue what was going on. Like, I trotted off the back of a helicopter in a war zone with my bag on one shoulder because nobody told me different at that point. It was only when I was out there and I was like, okay, that's not going to work. So it was so far out of my comfort zone. But I learned to be courageous. I learned to just get on with shit. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We swear a lot, mate. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I learned to just get on with shit, really, and give it a go. And even if it looks hard, try it. Even if it feels scary, do it anyway. And I wasn't that person before the military. I played it very safe. So I think it gave me the courage to take risks. which is exactly what I've had to do in my business. I've taken a big risk. It's paid off, fortunately.
Shelley, I think one of the things that really stands out from like your story and your background, being a mental health professional before you joined the military, was so when you joined and you're treating patients, military patients who are suffering from mental health problems, whether that's PTSD, whether that's stuff they've experienced on ops, and you'd have treated them to the best of your ability with all your clinical skills and all the innovative things that you have to hand. Did your approach to it change after your deployment to Afghanistan? We were in Afghanistan at the same time. That's where I met you. Okay, supporting the UK Med Group in Afghanistan. And I guess it's one of those things that you take for granted. Like mental health nurse in the UK, or you go home, you have issues, you go and speak to a mental health nurse, or it's a mental health professional within the NHS, who you have to explain the situation to, even though you know it's very difficult to explain it to you because, not that, you weren't there, man, but that kind of approach. But you have been there. Did that change your approach to providing mental health support?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly. Because I think, so obviously I joined and I was very gung-ho. I was like, right, send me wherever, volunteer for everything. I was very much constantly wanting to be attached to fighting units. And then actually, I really don't believe that you can understand the reality of conflict until you're in it. And that's not to say that all these professionals who help military personnel and military veterans aren't helpful. They absolutely are. But even me as a service person within the service, I didn't understand that environment until I'd been in it myself. And my goodness, what a shock to the system that was, So I think there's something about having that shared experience that just changes how you do things, And I think, even now, to this day, I sometimes work with privately with military charities who might fund people's sessions. And often these people come from units that are not accustomed to talking about things and quite guarded. And, when I share my own background with them, I think it really helps. It helps them open up a little bit. It helps them to know that I understand the context that they've been operating in. And then there's a shared language, isn't there?
It's like that familiarity.
Yeah,
it's like the familiarity that we all know.
Yeah.
Us three of us know, and other veterans and other service listening to the pod and watching the pod all know that feeling of stepping off that helicopter and plane and the heat just hitting your face. We all know that. We all know the taste of a warm water bottle in the midday. So it's that familiarity, and I totally get it. When you talk like that, it's like, oh yeah, you're not. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And then you would open up a little bit more. So
yeah. I think it's taken me a little while though to become comfortable with sharing my sort of military journey. So for the first couple of years after leaving, I didn't really talk about it, didn't really tell anyone, it just felt kind of odd. But I suppose as I've got distance from that part of my life, I've been able to now start to think of it maybe in a different way and use some of the things I learn in a helpful way.
I was the same, when I left the military, I joined so I live in the middle of Wales, and the village I live in, or the town and village I live in, it's a very, very close-knit community. And it was only until 2 or 3 years since living here that I just started to put some military memorabilia up in the house. And people come around going, "Are you in the military?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, it was like I'd never talked about it. And now I don't shut up about it. But it's like what you said. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I was exactly the same. 2 years, 3 years. I was just like, where did you come from? Oh yeah, I just did a little bit beforehand or whatever. It was never, hey guys, I was in the army or anything like that. I never thought I came across like that anyway. So
yeah. I do wonder as well, psychologically, if there is something about even if we haven't all got PTSD here, like those experiences are traumatic. Even if you don't develop difficulties after, the very experiences themselves are challenging. It is traumatic. Like, it takes a lot of resilience to kind of operate in that environment. And I think in a way, when you move away from it, you need to like just let that settle for a while so you can kind of approach it again.
Yeah,
I think that's a really, it's a really interesting and really like a really unique point to highlight, that different people leave in different ways. You know, I served for 23 years. You know, when I left and I was looking for work, I had the comfort of a pension, for example. I had the comfort of, you know, it's okay. I'm going to be all right. Paul left after 12 years.
Right.
Paul left after.
Right.
So even leaving after 12 years and you leaving after 14 years without like an immediate pension, without that safety blanket of the people, because the people were the thing I missed the most, you know? I left from being in the military. I'm quite a personable person. I like people, I like being around people, always played sport. So when I left and we settled initially, my wife and I, we settled in North Wales, trying to create like a network of friends when you're a 40-year-old man is like odd. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, it's okay, I'll get some friends at club. It was literally impossible. And I found the social part really difficult for a couple of years. Really difficult. Whereas in the military, where's the party at? You know, because I'd been in the same corps for 23 years, I kind of knew everyone. I knew everyone in every unit. I understood my role. So it didn't matter where I was, you always had people around you. And I think that was the hardest thing for me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because I think my husband would have said similar, actually, that's the part he missed. You've got like a ready-made group of mates wherever you go, haven't you?
Yeah, and that was another thing. It was, you could reinvent yourself, you know? So if you were like, I made a couple of mistakes in that unit. When I go to this unit, I ain't doing that. So I'm gonna do this. But this is like a free therapy session. It's brilliant. Thank you, Shelley. Don't invoice us for this, by the way. Please don't invoice us for this. If we get back to the to the pod and the business part, this is a part of the pod that I really like. Okay, and it's almost like your Dragon's Den moment. Not that we're going to give you any money, but it's that your elevator pitch. So over to you, Shelley. Tell us what it is that stands Fortitude Psychological Therapy above everybody else.
Yeah. Good question, because there's loads of therapy out there, you know. So what I suppose I say we, because I've got like a team of associates who work with me as well, who also do some freelance work. So we offer therapy. So generally speaking, we specialise in trauma therapy. And let me tell you, it is really hard to get a decent trauma therapist. It's easy to find a generic therapist, but getting someone who's really an expert in trauma, it's pretty tough. So that's what we specialise in, is offering trauma therapy all around the country, online or in person. But we also offer clinical supervision for other therapists. So I've got a little group of therapists. I supervise their practice, help them kind of skill up in working with trauma, and get more specialists in that area. And then we also offer training and events, webinars. So it's all going on. More recently, I've started kind of doing lots of collaborations. So I suppose this is more about kind of beyond therapy, but actually just getting this information out into the world about trauma, what causes trauma, how to heal from trauma, how trauma doesn't always look the way we're going to expect it to look. So recently I've been working on lots of collaborations with like press and podcasters like yourself, media and stuff like that, just to try and get like good quality information out into the world about trauma.
That's brilliant.
Shelley, thank you so much. It's been an absolute. We could talk to you all day about this.
I would definitely charge you for that.
I think I would also invoice for that. I'm not sure who I would send the invoice to, but yeah. But thank you so much. I appreciate how busy you are. I know how busy you are. Fortitude Psychological Therapy is a growing business. You can see it growing. Your social media footprint. This is something I just wanted to touch on as well, by the way, is because you provide a professional service, but you almost make it, you normalize it, by the way.
Yeah.
You normalize with your videos, with your content, you make it like this acceptable thing. I know you've recently released like a newsletter and all these things that are it's a selfless thing. And I know you're a business, but I think you're normalizing therapy right across the piece. And for that, I think, I'm truly grateful for it. I'm truly grateful for you coming on the pod and sharing your time with us. And yeah, it's been ace.
Definitely.
Oh.
And we wish you all the best in the future and anything that we can do. And if you just let us know. I mean, it's been great having you on, Shelley.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to come and chat to you both.